A few announcements before the service begins. To begin with, we are recommending that people wear masks. They are not required here, but there were reports of a few positive COVID readings this week among church members, so we are recommending mask wearing. And there are masks in the rear of the church if you are interested. Next Sunday afternoon, a wonderful event is going to take place here, as often happens, the Endurance of Hope Holocaust Remembrance Concert. You can get a lot of more information about the concert on these posters or by reading your weekly online church announcements, which is always a good idea. There really is a lot of good and interesting and helpful information in the weekly church announcements. So you're encouraged to get in the habit of reading those each week. There is more information there about the concert. This is a joint, it's a partnership between the Gloucester Meeting House Foundation and Temple Ahavat Achim. It's a Yom HaShoah program marking Holocaust Remembrance Day. Again, that's next Sunday, May 1st at 3 p.m. right here. Yeah, and also, Charles Nazarian can give you more information about that. People at home are warmly welcome and also encouraged to get candles and matches so you can join in the Chalice Lighting, which will take place in a few minutes after the service begins. And speaking of Chalice Lighting, you're encouraged after the service to come up and feast your eyes on the beautiful, beautiful chalice that has been crafted by our sexton cum artist, Carrie Mullen. It really is beautiful. And the closer you get, the more beautiful it becomes. So I was hoping that Carrie would be here this morning so that we could express our appreciation in person. She wasn't here last week, but it really is a masterpiece. Finally, next Sunday's service is going to be a particularly meaningful one. For one thing, it will be Membership Sunday. That means that if you have been attending for a while, either online or in person, and are not yet a member, you are very warmly invited. If you're interested in deepening your connections to the congregation, you're very warmly invited to membership. And so if that is something that you are considering or would consider, please talk with Reverend Janet sometime this week. You can either email her or call her. But we warmly invite you to consider signing the membership book next Sunday. Also, next Sunday is going to be Reverend Janet's last service that she will lead before leaving on a 3-month sabbatical. So maybe you especially want to come and in person wish her well before she leaves on the sabbatical. Next Sunday, we do hope to see as many of you as possible, either in person, ideally, or online if in person is not possible. And that is all the announcements that I have. And we will now proceed.
Welcome. Welcome to this, our Gloucester Unitarian Universalist Church. All are welcome here. I am Carl Frank, not the minister, but a member of the congregation, leading the service today in the temporary absence of Reverend Janet Parsons, who is preparing for a sabbatical. This church to which I welcome you was founded in the same decade with the foundation of our nation, and based on the philosophy of human freedom characteristic of the European Enlightenment, the philosophical movement which inspired the words of our Declaration of Independence. The founders of this church split off from the established Puritan Church of Massachusetts because they saw the doctrine of hell and eternal punishment as inconsistent with the teachings of Jesus, and they taught instead that salvation was possible for all, and hence the name Universalist Church. Consequently, we do not have a fixed creed, but take the practice of forgiveness and love as our foundation. In the 1770s, there was a lot of talk in Europe, in the newspapers, and in the American colonies about a new movement that was being called the Enlightenment. One newspaper in Berlin published a public call for an op-ed article to explain to the public what this was all about. The philosopher Immanuel Kant responded with a now famous little essay entitled, "What is Enlightenment?" And unlike the rest of Kant's works, which I have read, it is quite intelligible. Here is what Kant wrote. Of course, it's not in German, but I've taken care of that. Enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity. Immaturity is the inability to use one's understanding without guidance from others. This immaturity becomes self-imposed when its cause lies not in lack of understanding, but in lack of resolve and courage to use your own understanding without guidance from another. Sapere aude, have courage to use your own understanding. That is the motto of enlightenment. What happens next? That's what I just did, the reading of what is enlightenment.
Opening hymn.
The opening hymn comes next. It is number 21 in the gray hymnal. The choir will lead the singing from the floor in the front, right? the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we light a flame as an intentional symbol of enlightenment and warmth. The words are printed in your order of service. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift.
And also we'll light
the peace candle, which we have been doing ever since a war broke out in Europe, and we will continue to do so. We might have to do it for a very long time, until war ends, which it never does. Reverend Janet has reintroduced to our service the wisdom moment, a relatively light-hearted story which might amuse any children in attendance. That's how it became as a very informal thing, but one with a moral. The wisdom moment for today is related to Earth Day and to our celebration of Mother Earth by focusing on a variety of creation myths during today's service. The Ojibwe people, who were among those who lived near the Great Lakes, are the source of a particularly, to me, interesting creation story. It will sound familiar to anyone who is reading our book group selection for this month, Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. But it is slightly different from the story that is told in Robin Wall Kimmerer's tribe. It comes to us indirectly from very early days through a French fur trapper. You probably all know that the upper Midwest and far west was first explored by Europeans, by Frenchmen who had come up the St. Lawrence and were involved in the fur trade. And the French were already present in the headwaters of the Mississippi when Lewis and Clark first explored that area on behalf of the United States. So this comes to us from a Monsieur Nicolas Perrault, who lived amongst the peoples of the upper Mississippi and the Great Lakes for many years. Perrault is not specific about which tribe told him the story that I'm about to relate, but the similarities to other familiar Native American stories, especially amongst the Algonquian speaking tribes, will be familiar to you. One such is the Ojibwe Turtle Island creation story, and Robin Kimmerer's story, which she tells on the basis of what she learned from the Indian nation that she belongs to. The earth was created before there were human beings by animal spirits, or the original spirits of animals, under the leadership of their chief, the Great Hare. All the animals were floating on a wooden raft over boundless waters when the Great Hare asked for a volunteer who could dive and discover if there was anything below the water. The muskrat was the one who found the bottom and came up with a single grain of sand. The Great Hare was a shaman with the ability to make new things from old, and from this single grain formed the earth. When the original animals died, the Great Hare, with his shamanistic magic, created a new generation of animals from their corpses, which are not just spirit animals, but the animals that we hunt and live on. He created not only more of the animals, but he also made from the corpses of the original spirit animals humankind. And thus it was that men and women belonged to clans according to the form of animal from which the shaman hare had fashioned their ancestors. Upon a successful hunt, a prayer of thanks was always amongst these people addressed to the spirit of the animal, which gave its life for the welfare of mankind. The responsive reading, which originally was going to be read by Holly Tangui, Earth Teach Me, is number 551 in the Gray Hymnal, and will be led by Lucille. Okay?
Thanks for your patience. Earth, teach me stillness, as the grasses are stilled with light.
Earth, teach me suffering, as old stones suffer with memory.
Earth, teach me caring, as parents who secure their young.
Earth, teach me courage, as the tree which stands all alone.
Earth, teach me limitation, as the ant which crawls on the ground.
Earth, teach me freedom, as the eagle which soars in the sky.
Earth, teach me resignation, as the leaves which die in the fall.
Earth, teach me regeneration, as the seed which flowers in the spring.
Earth, teach me to forget myself, as melted snow forgets its life.
Earth, teach me to remember kindness, as dry leaves keep the rain.
And now we will go directly into silent meditation. The reading today is This Seed, a poem that was written by Sally Waite, a member of our congregation who unfortunately couldn't be here today. She had a prior commitment. Sally is also the wife of Carl, our speaker today. This seed. This seed is going someplace. It darts out of the envelope. I'm going someplace, it says defiantly, not noticing that it's far from the brown earth. It hugs the side of the envelope flap, timid for a moment, and then that hop, that release from the envelope. I smile, delighted at the spark of life, the movement, knowing its seed nature, to find growth, expression, although in a large, somewhat homely room with pots of geraniums offering life by the large windows. So why do I write? To find growth, expression. Now, what follows is a dialogue between Seed and the speaker. Seed says, I need a hand. I can catch on your pocket with my delicate hooks. Spill me out where it's dense, dirty. Give me a mooring in that garden of yours, which you forgot to water. Me. Where the spindly zinnias stand, able to produce only one small flower, water. I forgot to water. I forgot all those things the plants required. Seed. I can last a season without water. I can lay fallow. I can come up another year. I'll do your heart good when I do come up. Me. Seed, you demand nothing. What is this? I'm used to pressure, rules. It says on the envelope, must soak in water for a day, be planted 1/4 inch deep, when the soil temperature is 70 degrees and with blah, blah, blah. Seed interrupting. Will you stop with those rules? Toss me in the garden, kick a little earth over me so the birds don't see me. The earth and I will do the rest. So ends Sally's reading.
To support the work of this church, your offerings will now be gratefully accepted. Is creation a one-time 6-day performance, possible only for the God of Abraham and Isaac? I think not. Even in the Hebrew Bible, there is more than one creation story. Read Genesis chapter 2. Creation goes on in big and little ways all the time, both among things and stories. So, in my opinion, does Revelation continue. Native American nations have their own distinctive creation stories, some of which we have heard this morning, one of which. Stories are being created again and again, some newer than others. Science now has a story of the creation of planets from stars, and stars from the ashes of earlier generations of stars. On a windowsill at our house, as I began writing these Earth Day thoughts, you would have found 16 tiny brown flower pots formed from peat moss for starting seeds. In each pot now stands a seedling tomato. The tallest among them sat on the desk as I began this sermon. The pots were 2.5 inches tall, and the plants today stand another 4 inches, with paired blade-shaped seed leaves spreading 2.5 inches wide, in a gesture imitating the wings of a bird in liftoff. Nestled in the cleft between the seed leaves are the first pairs of true tomato leaves, a few random lobes of a darker green with the microscopically fine fuzz typical of tomato plants' leaves. These true leaves should be measured in millimeters, not inches. They are quite different from the seed leaves with which the seed began. Today, on the Saturday after Earth Day, as I wrote this yesterday. As I continued my work on this sermon, the tray of seedlings was outdoors in the sunlight for their very first direct encounter with the sun and wind. In the 16 tiny flower pots, you would have seen some plants now 4 inches tall, but mere growth in size is not the point. You would be seeing plants that did not exist a month ago, and well-articulated true leaves that likewise did not exist 2 weeks ago. And in the cleft between them, on each plant, is a tiny point of growth from which more leaves, then branches, flowers, and fruit will appear. The seed has not grown into a bigger seed. Just as the earth, in its 4 billion years, did not grow into a bigger variety of itself. From the seeds and the earth, altogether new things emerge. By Memorial Day, when this plant will be outdoors in a garden, no trace of seed leaves will remain. Where did these seedling tomatoes come from? Not from Market Basket, Shaw's, Stop and Shop. Not from Common Crow either. They didn't come from anywhere. The question assumes that everything comes from some other place. They did grow, each from their own seed. The seeds from which they emerged were planted 1/4 inch deep. They were watered regularly. Critically important to germination and growth, I kept the seed warm. Tomatoes won't sprout unless their soil is warm. The little pot and the peat from which it was formed played their part too. These little plants did not make themselves. Neither did I make them. It looks to me as if there has been a process playing itself out in their short lives. Why were its first leaves shaped like blades of grass and not like normal tomato leaves, plant leaves? Why do those first leaves fall off as the tomato-shaped leaves start to grow themselves? A Taoist might say the Tao just works that way. Actually, there is an important discovery in 20th century botany that is part of this story. Earth's fossil library shows those who care to look that in the past, an alternation of generations appeared amongst plants that reproduce by means of seeds, something like the life stages of a caterpillar butterfly emerging from from the chrysalis. The seed is actually an independent form of life that lives as a means of reproduction in between generations of full-grown plants. At least that is what I have been shown the evidence for in a biology class. A creative process has left a record of hundreds of millions of years of earth, water, and sun at work to set the scene for the seed I bought from Johnny's Seeds, a business incorporated in the state of Maine who engaged the U.S. Postal Service to bring it to Gloucester. Now, we human beings are part of the great collaboration whereby life maintains itself on Earth. Some of us would have said, following the lead of Joyce Kilmer's poem about the tree, that God made this little tomato plant. I respond, yes, if you insist. Let's say God made this little tomato plant, but how did God do it? By means of the sun, the earth, even Johnny's Seed Company, and even the U.S. Postal Service. And the process took God a billion years. This being a UU church, you aren't expected to agree with me, but disagree as you will. To understand how this came about, I consider a universal collaboration was played out in a billion-year circle dance, a process, not a thing, a process that today ended with my online purchases, and how purchases are negotiated, paid for, and delivered, and what motivated me in Gloucester to plant seeds on his windowsill in the first place. Some other stories are easier to follow, and some are harder. Creation of new individual things occurs at the lowest level of nature, at the quantum level of quarks and photons. Albert Einstein, whose name I'm sure you all know, honored another great physicist who was in his generation, who is probably not so well known, Max Planck. Max Planck was honored by Einstein in a memorial address which he gave to the American Society of Learned Society. I can't remember the name of it. It was an American association of academics on the occasion of Planck's death, which was in, I think, about 47. Planck and Einstein both received Nobel Prizes in the decade around the First World War. And Planck was important in Einstein's life because Planck was the initiator of the part of 20th century physics to which Einstein could never reconcile himself. Planck introduced quantum physics, of a theory that accounts for events at the atomic level and which accounts for the transformation of energy in the form of a wave or a beam to the transfer of that energy to physical objects. Einstein and Planck each discovered a fundamental physical constant, a sort of discovery that puts both of them at the very highest level of science where only people like Newton stand. By discovering an absolutely uniform and universal gravitational constant. Newton began modern science by discovering the gravitational constant, which is observed to be present in both the fall of an apple from a tree and the orbits of stars that circle one another. Einstein's theories of relativity established the speed of light as a universal constant of nature, relating, amongst other things, energy to matter in terms of equivalent energy content. His famous formula, E equals mc squared, the C in that stands for the speed of light as measured from a system at rest. Planck's theories established the laws whereby a beam of energy, for example, of light, will, under certain totally common circumstances, break up into a stream of units, quanta, units that behave as things, and in doing so obeys only probabilistic rules. In the case of light, these little units have become known as photons. So Einstein and Planck stood on opposite sides of a fundamental question about physics, whether fundamentally nature consists of little units or whether it is a continuity. To this day, there has been no resolution of these two different fundamental views of the foundations of physics. And so the creation of new things, photons of light, occurs around us all the time when light transfers its warmth to solid objects. Units that are created from pure energy in the interaction. And at the other end of that scale, there are new planets being formed around new stars. This one universe in which we all share, from photons to galaxies, is abuzz with new things all the time. Now going back to my order of service. We now have the Unison prayer of affirmation, which you will find in your gray hymnal as number 470. We affirm the unfailing renewal of life. And reaching for the sun, all living creatures shall fulfill themselves. We affirm the steady growth of human companionship, rising from ancient cradles and reaching to the stars, people of the world, and understanding. We affirm a continuing hope that out of every tragedy, the spirits of individuals shall rise to build a better world. The closing hymn is number 1064 in the blue, in the teal-colored paperback hymnal. It is Blue Boat Home.
Below me I feel no motion,
I turned it off so you couldn't hear, so that you were prevented, so that you didn't have to listen to my singing. Be a lamp unto yourself. Yours is not the only lamp, as you are not the only self, and yet it is yours. Honor the light which is yours. We'll now close our service by the ceremony of extinguishing the chalice. Those of you who are watching from home, this is the time when we blow out the candles. The words for extinguishing the chalice are in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace and return in love. Thank you.